Hello, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to, I should say, if you haven't been here before. But if you're one of the 3 people that are listening, welcome back. Hi. Send me a message. Let me know what you think. No. There's actually 30. I'm averaging actually 30 downloads per episode, which is actually kind of cool. I can see those statistics. Yeah. It's a pretty weird thing for me to want to start a podcast at 30 years old, but here we are. I'm just going to keep doing it and see what happens. I'm still interviewing my friends because, there's a plane going by. We'll just wait for the plane to go by. Okay, plane's gone by. I'm feeling a bit more confident. This is good. Okay, today I'm speaking with, a friend. I mean, I've got some pretty interesting friends. Her name's Emilie Paige. She's a writer, political commentator, and a libertarian thinker. In this podcast, we kind of work out what that is. Libertarian. We delve into her. We talk about politics. We talk about, has feminism gone too far? We talk a lot about Jesus. Always seems to come up in conversation with me. I can't quite work out why. No, Emilie grew up in like a really religious sort of fundamentalist Christian household. So I just wanted to know more about that, I guess, and what her experience was like growing up. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's get into it. Emilie Paige, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. That was a bit awkward, but that's all right. Hey, this is only the 4th time I've ever interviewed someone, so I'm a little bit nervous. But I've brought you here today because I want to know a little bit more about you. You describe yourself as a libertarian thinker. I'm really interested in that idea because I don't really know anyone who is a self-described libertarian. I'm sort of surrounded by leftists and people who call themselves socialists, and I don't really know much about what any of that means either, but where does your how would you describe what a libertarian thinker is? Like, what is that?
I mean, it's pretty much just a leave me alone is the general philosophy. Is this idea that I know what's best for my life, the government doesn't know best, like I know what makes me happy, what I want to do, I can make decisions. Like, I guess a good example is like, say, smoking or something.
Right.
I can make that decision for myself as to whether I want to forgo the long-term health for the short-term benefit of smoking. And I don't think that we should outlaw cigarettes because people make the wrong choice. It's like that may be the right choice for them. I don't know if I've explained that well.
No, you did, but I have a few questions about that. Like, is it the government's role to like put a tax on cigarettes to like limit its use, like put people off wanting to smoke? Or?
I guess it comes down to whether that action, like, or at least this is what I believe, whether that action hurts other people or not.
Right. Okay.
So I do think the government basically has a role to step in and say, hey, like, you can't steal this person's car. That's not okay.
Okay.
To uphold contracts. So there's a basis like I can't sign a contract with you and then just like bail. I have to uphold that contract.
But it's not the government's role to tell you you can or can't smoke.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever other vice that may be. Could be alcohol. Could be marijuana. Could be who you want to love. It could be... there's a lot of variety there. As long as you aren't hurting someone else, I don't think that there needs to be a law against what you're doing.
Interesting. Okay. I'm trying to think of a counter example to that, but the only thing that comes to my head is like the government would make it illegal to drink drive, but as you said, that hurts.
Yeah, that's a very clear a very clear example of you're putting a lot of people at risk of very severe injury or death if you're drunk driving. But I don't think it's very helpful for the police to go around and like banging down doors because someone's smoking weed. Like,
right.
I don't think that's a benefit to society.
But if everyone, I suppose a weird thing I find that is like illegal is like LSD.
Yeah, which is a lot less dangerous than alcohol if we're going to come down to it. Like most of these drugs, with the exception of like the extreme ones.
Like, yeah, even like MDMA.
Yeah.
But what about something like heroin? Like, that is highly addictive. If people get their hands on it, they can harm themselves. Should it be the government's job to care about that?
Well, I've been kind of happy to see the government moving away from that and realizing the people that are doing drugs like heroin probably need help. It's more of a health issue than it is more health issue than it is anything else, really. So Canberra, the ACT government has recently decriminalized things like heroin and meth, which are really extreme drugs, obviously, because they understand that the people that are doing those drugs, they probably need help. They don't need to go to jail. I don't think criminalizing something or having the police come in and arrest you is going to help the situation. That just causes more trauma, causes people to be less willing to go get help. So I don't think that even those extreme drugs like heroin or meth should be made illegal.
Okay. Ooh. Okay.
I guess there's different questions as to like selling it and whatnot. But I actually don't think it should be illegal to sell these drugs.
Okay.
Because I think there needs to be some sort of regulation. So this kind of comes back to like the contract. You say, this is heroin. Well, what if it's actually fentanyl? And I think that you should be held accountable for just trying to deceive someone and breaking that kind of contractual agreement that you have. But right now, because all these drugs are illegal, someone comes up and they want X drug, say they want cocaine, and instead they get fentanyl. It's a big problem in the United States. Or they want heroin and they get fentanyl. And it's a much stronger drug, a much more deadly drug. So they snort this or inject it or whatever they do with it. And then they die. And so I think my goal would be to see fewer people die from drug overdoses and get the help they need.
Okay, but you believe all drugs should be legal?
Yes.
Okay. So what in your mind, like what is the government's role in your head? Like what?
I think the government has a role to regulate.
But not impose restrictions?
Yeah, I think that gets to the point if it's a morality thing. Like, it's a very moralistic thing. We've decided that a lot of people think weed is a problem, while alcohol is totally fine. There's a lot of demonization of, say, weed or cocaine or one of these drugs. Well, it's not a moral question. It's somebody has a different worldview, a different set of morals. They're doing this thing. They've chosen that for themselves. Who am I to say you're evil because you've decided to put something into your body and you should go to jail and society should punish you?
But that makes me think if they tried to make alcohol illegal.
They did that in the United States.
Okay.
So that's the whole Al Capone, prohibition. Yeah. You got all of these gangsters. Lots of people died. There was gang violence. And that'll still exist today, but it's in the drug market, in the drug world. We've got the war on drugs in the United States.
So they legalized alcohol, but they still made drugs illegal.
Yeah, they kept drugs illegal. They made more drugs illegal.
Why do you think that is?
I think it comes down to just this moral idea. A lot of people are freaked out by substances that could mess with someone's brain. They've put a spiritual component to that. I think some drugs, like LSD or acid, a lot of people say they have spiritual experiences on them. And I think there's a lot of fear of that.
I suppose I would be concerned because I mean... I mean, if something like Valium was widely available, it's like I would just go get it.
Wait, Valium's not like widely available?
Not in Australia.
Oh.
No.
Well, also like Excedrin migraine isn't widely available in Australia. It's one of my great struggles. It's a basic like migraine headache medicine. It's like over the counter in the United States.
What's it called?
Excedrin migraine.
Excedrin migraine. What was the chemical element in that?
It's acetaminophen and caffeine, pretty much.
Oh.
Because we can't be trusted to take basic pharmaceuticals for like a headache. When really, like, if you think about it, paracetamol is quite dangerous. It's much more dangerous than, say, like a lot of these.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
How so?
It's so easy to overdose on. I actually know someone who accidentally overdosed. She'd had surgery, so she was taking other medications, and she didn't have someone watching her, so she didn't know how much she'd taken, and she like woke up and took. She thought she'd napped longer or something. We don't know.
How much could you possibly take?
It doesn't take that much.
Paracetamol, eh? Other things you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to your
random factors.
I did
the conversation
not
diverges.
Expect to talk about drugs. We'll find out how much of this I decide to edit out. Okay, so I'm interested in your upbringing. You grew up in the United States.
Yes.
you want to tell me about that? How was your upbringing like?
I feel like I had a somewhat weird upbringing, an odd childhood. My aunt used to joke that we were feral children because we grew up on a farm. We just kind of ran around outside, did whatever we wanted.
Whereabouts? On a farm?
Farm in rural Washington.
And how was that?
It was good. I enjoyed, like, my early childhood was great.
Yeah.
My parents became much more religious throughout my upbringing. Like,
so they weren't originally religious?
They weren't. I think I was in like first grade when they became born again.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Born again Republican or born again Christian?
Both. Yeah, so that it was no Halloween was an example of being of the devil.
Yeah. I remember distinctly one time, like, trick-or-treaters came up to our house in Halloween and we just locked the doors. Like, don't go to them, they're from the devil, my mum used to say. But she wasn't, like, strict and mean.
Yeah.
In my mind, she just... She grew up Jehovah's Witness.
Got
so
it.
No birthdays, no Christmas.
That's much more
yeah, but she's not a nasty lady.
I don't think it's nastiness. I remember I bought into it. I think that was kind of almost one of the more sad things.
How old were you?
I would have been, I was young. So I would have been first grade, second grade, between the ages of like 8 and like 12.
Yeah.
Well, until I grew up, I bought into that whole idea of like, this is of the devil. We can't do this. I'm different. Christians must set themselves apart. They must be a light on a hill. And looking back, it is quite sad, that whole idea, because I saw myself as being better than my peers in many ways. Like, I had this whole egotism, and it's like, oh, they're celebrating Halloween. Like, the other kids are getting dressed up, but we're so much better. We're God's chosen.
Wow.
When really I was just missing out on candy and dressing up.
Yeah. And that's weird. And often religious people remind me of people that they don't want to deal with their own inequities or their own failures, so they have to go around and judge other people and focus on what other people are doing wrong, when it's much harder to look at yourself than it is to judge other people.
Yeah. I feel like I had a huge ego as a child because of it in many ways.
Like, how old?
I was just like very young. It's like, even as a small, like 8-year-old, 9, I'm probably not a 5-year-old. 5-year-old, I'm oblivious.
Yeah. So, when did you leave America?
I left as an adult, so after uni.
After uni? Where'd you go to uni?
George Washington University in Washington, D.C., which is not Washington State, which causes lots of confusion. The other side of the country.
Right. Were you like a Republican back then?
I was very Republican up through like my teenage years.
Yeah.
People joke I was Republican royalty. Met the Bushes when I was a small child.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
There's a really cute picture of me holding hands with President Bush.
Oh my God, I'm
like
going to
walking
find
off
it.
of Air Force One.
I want to see that.
I'll have to get my mom to show it.
But when did you transition? Like, when was the moment when you were like, oh, this is not me?
I don't think it was, it wasn't an instant transition. So like moving away from like Republicanism and conservatism happened in uni. For sure. It was learning more, studying economics.
Yep.
Meeting more people. I think that's a huge one. It's like you meet people that are immigrants and you realize that immigrants aren't evil. And they're not here to just take our jobs, or however they said it on South Park.
Yeah, right.
So, I think meeting people was good. Meeting people with different sexualities was a huge big one for me.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that shifted me away and set me apart in the church. Because I came to uni and I was like, I'm going to dive full force, head face first, words, into the religious thing. So I went to every single religious group on campus and signed up for all of the Christian groups.
When you first got to college?
Oh yeah. Like every single one. I had Bible study on like Sunday nights, Monday nights, but Tuesday. It was so crazy. I think this weird bonkers religious schedule.
Yeah.
But eventually I kind of started whittling them off. So there was one where something about, like, there was a verse about Jesus like speaking to the rocks and the rocks speaking back or something. And we painted rocks and then like we had to speak to the rocks during this Bible study. And it was so weird. I was so uncomfortable. I was like, nah, I'm out.
This was in college?
This was in college.
Man.
It was like we're calling to the rocks as if they were going to speak back to us.
Was there like, and was that like the specific moment where you're like, I just can't do this anymore?
Not entirely. No. Then I was like, it's just that group.
Okay.
And so it's like, I'm going to go to the other one.
So you found other Christian groups.
So I found other Christian groups. I had a really hard time connecting with the other Christians on campus because I had a much darker past than they had. Mm-hmm. And so it's like the things that they're dealing with. They're like, oh, I'm stressed out about this test. And I was like, oh, I'm stressed out about this elder who keeps stalking me from my home church. Which isn't something that I could just say. And so everyone's doing like their confession and talking about the things that they're confessing their sins. They're like, oh, I was prideful.
Yeah. Which
is always like a really good one because it's just like you haven't done anything that bad. It's super vague and everyone can be like, oh yeah, I'm prideful sometimes. It's a good classic one.
And then I often find Christians are prideful about admitting that they're prideful. Like, look at me, I'm admitting that I'm prideful. I'm such a great person. Haha, look at me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was definitely one group that was like all of that. Yeah, trying to create this intimacy, this sharing culture, but I was not comfortable with that. And I was having like a bit of like I'd have like close to breakdowns every time that would happen, like the sharing, just because I was dealing with I still had this guy in my life that was causing a lot of trauma.
And he was from the church?
He's from the church. He's one of my high school teachers. We kind of skipped over that whole part. And so that was difficult. I'm getting into way more detail than I expected to get into. And then I ended up basically leaving that group. And I finally found like the most fundamentalist group on campus and joined that one.
Okay, so you went from Christians talking to rocks to Christians admitting measly little sins to fundamentalist Christians.
Yes.
And what was that like?
I joined that cool church.
Were you going around door knocking? Trying to save people?
We didn't do the Jehovah's Witness door knocking. Well, there was one program where they had everyone go stay on a beach in like South Carolina, and they had to go and talk to all the people on the beach and like try to save them. Yeah. I was like, nah, I can't do that.
You're not into it?
Not into it. I think I was a little ashamed of my beliefs at that point.
So did you have like a spiritual relationship with Jesus, or were you
yeah, I was super devout. Like reading my own journals was weird.
But were you and Jesus like because my understanding is there's two kinds of Christians. Yeah. There's religious Christians who don't work on the Sabbath and go to church on Sunday and read the Bible through a very fundamentalist sort of lens. Like, you can't be gay, no sex before marriage, no drinking alcohol. And then there's the Christians that have a really deep spiritual relationship with Jesus. Like, I suppose the Bible in the book of John talks about Jesus dwelling within you. Yeah. And it's this whole different experience. Like, did you like the Holy Spirit? Did you feel like you had the Holy Spirit dwelling within you?
Oh yeah, 100%. Really? I was super. I have journals and journals and journals of me just like prayers, talking to God, talking to Jesus.
Did he talk back to you?
No. And that was one of my big pet peeves with Jesus.
But not like audibly, but did you feel him?
That was, for me, it was guilt and shame. And more guilt and more shame. Right. So for me, it was like I would pray. I was praying for escape. Most of the time, I was like, I'm in an awful situation and I want out. I want away. And God, please help me. And I thought it was my fault. And it was like, I'm sinning. This is all because of me, because I'm bad. Jesus, get me out. And Jesus never answered.
So you never heard sort of any relief that like you were okay. And I suppose I'm trying to relate back to my religious upbringing. Part of it is like, oh, you can't be gay. You're wrong for being gay. And then the other part is like, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're beautiful. The Holy Spirit loves you. You didn't feel any of that?
I think I pushed back against that part of it. The like, oh, you're evil. You're sinning because you're gay. I definitely got to the point. That was one that I always pushed back against because my aunt was gay and she was someone I admired so much, like, and I still admire her so much. She's one of like my heroes. And so I couldn't compute that. I was like, nah, my auntie is the best person ever. She's amazing. I cannot possibly condemn her to hell for that. And so I always push back against that, even in like the most fundamentalist But I also didn't get the loving Jesus. I mean, in a sense, I did. Everyone tells me, oh, Jesus loves you. He's doing this for a reason. And I had that ego of, oh, this must be for a reason. God has some purpose for me. But for me, I'm an atheist now. I don't think it makes sense to me that God was absent because there wasn't a God. But yeah, no, for me, religion was more of a burden, more of, yeah.
So when
more shame and guilt.
Okay, and when did you realize this? Like,
I think I spent a lot of time searching for God, searching for a way out, for God to save me from my own actions and myself and my sins. Sorry, I'm getting a little lost here. Yes, so I did I read the Bible many, many times.
Really?
I've probably read it a dozen times, cover to cover.
Dude, I haven't even read it once, cover to cover.
I was so into it, so searching. I was searching for the light. And there are those verses that bring comfort. And I had a couple of verses that I really loved that brought comfort.
Do you remember what they were? No pressure.
Yes. Yeah, it was Psalm 35, I think. His anger is but for a moment. And it's something to the fact his anger is but for a moment, but his love is forever. Yeah. Something, the night passes and morning comes, something to that effect that I clung to.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you were in this fundamentalist group, you were talking to Jesus. I suppose, yeah, when did you break away from it and realize it was all bullshit?
Yeah, that was the last question that you asked that I got lost on. It was, I broke away from it actually in large part because the church pushed me away. It became a point of I had sinned as they saw it.
What was the sin?
I'd had sex.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. And
you sinner.
I know. And I told my counselor in confidence that I'd had sex. But the crime for having sex at this church was you would be basically ousted to the entire congregation of 1,000 people and put on the care list. And the idea was then people can pray for you and come and provide you support and accountability. And it was a loving action. In reality, it's just a public shaming and everyone's going to gossip about it. I know other people that have been put on the care list. Everyone just gossiped about it.
The care list. That's
the
a funny
care list.
The care list. Does that mean that they're trying to care for you?
Yeah.
It's so funny that the churches, they really, I would say the modern day church elevates sex before marriage, homosexuality.
It's that's the most important thing is sex. I'm like, why?
Well, it's the worst thing you can do, but it's sort of not in a way. It's what about, back to what we were saying before, pride, envy, jealousy, beating your wife.
Somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so weird, man.
Yeah. So that was the point. That pretty much put me to the brink of ready to kill myself. I was standing on the train tracks, being beside a train, waiting for the train to come, done.
Because the shame they made you feel?
Because of the shame. I was my life is over. All of this Christian community that I've built is going to reject me. They'll never accept me. I'm never a good enough Christian. And I just had the thought what if this is all for nothing? What if this isn't real? And that was the point where I was okay. And I was what if God isn't actually good? That was also another question that I had. And so I walked away and was okay, I'm going to step away from this. So I decided to slowly start stepping away from the church. But I had to do it in a way that I wouldn't get busted by the church.
Busted how?
Busted and put on the care list. So if you don't go...
Oh, wait. So you weren't on the care list?
So I ended up not actually put on the care list. They decided at the last minute to pull me off.
Okay.
I think because I definitely strongly hinted to my counselor that I would kill myself if they did.
Okay. Man.
I don't know if she actually understood that or got that. That wasn't something that she talked about or mentioned. But it was I don't know if I could take this. I've been thinking and I definitely said I've been thinking about suicide. There was a recent suicide that was quite prominent in the news. And I was man, I'm really jealous of that guy. Kind of want to do that. And she just wasn't picking up on it, or she didn't say anything about it. It was she completely ignored that. I was okay, is she not getting the hints? I don't want to say it right out because I was scared if I would said it right out that I that was where I was at.
Yeah.
That some other bad thing would happen.
Man, she must have been so flabbergasted that you'd had sex and not to even think about how you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, the sex. That was the real. Yeah. So that was kind of my stepping away. Read the Bible from cover to cover for the last time. And
even after that?
Even after that. That was that next 6 months I spent reading the Bible. And I read it with like a highlighter and a pen.
And were you praying to God?
Oh, yeah, I was praying. And I was like, I'd ask questions. I'd like read the Bible and I was like, is this actually good? Like, is this okay? So you get to the story of Tamar and she gets raped by her brother. And her other brother stands up for her. And he's like the only person that stands up for her. And he's like, I'm going to get that guy. Like, fuck him. We'll probably have to beat that out. But she's like, I'm going to get that guy. And ends up starting a war because the father, which is King David, ends up defending the brother that raped the sister, protects him. The other brother then murders the brother that raped his sister. And King David wages a war against him, or they end up in war, and he dies hanging by his hair. Like his head gets cut off. And it's like, he deserved it. Like, he was a bad guy. All he was trying to do was defend his sister who got raped.
What book was this in?
This is in Kings. This has been Kings. And I like remember reading that story and I was like, wow, no compassion for her. It was just like, she's been raped. Now she's ruined. She's no longer a virgin. And that was definitely like said in the text. So she's no longer a virgin. She now can't wear her beautiful dresses anymore. The poor thing, she can't wear her pretty dresses and she's not a virgin anymore. Like, that's the most important thing.
I almost think I remember one time listening to this guy preach, and he was saying those verses are exemplars of how we shouldn't be. The Old Testament is full of stories of what not to do.
Yeah, except then God says, David is a man after my own heart. And so then I have a hard time saying, okay, so the man after God's own heart doesn't stand up for his daughter who's been raped. Like, he defends the guy that raped her. And so like just reading that, I was like, this doesn't seem right to me. There were other passages, obviously the passages about women not speaking, women submitting to men.
What about like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
Trying to think. I don't think there was as much. And I think that I'm not going to say all the Bible is bad. It's not. No. I think the Sermon on the Mount is a wonderful text that is a good conversation on morality. And I think a lot of those better passages are in that section of the Bible. I do have a problem with the whole story of Jesus. And I think it's like, why does basically God has determined what is sin and what is not sin. And he's outlined that. He outlines it in the Old Testament. And then if we commit sins, he's going to kill, like basically we're going to burn in hell if we commit sins. And he's going to punish us, or we're going to be separated from him, or whatever the punishment is that you view it as. You get punished for not believing in him and not asking forgiveness for these sins that he's decided are sins. And the way you get forgiveness is because God sent his son, like himself, who is himself, to then die. You don't ask him to die in like a human sacrifice. He needs a human sacrifice for your sins so that he can then forgive you. I'm like, come on, God, like why, like if you're all powerful, if you're this amazing, why can't you just forgive us? Yeah. Like, why do you need a human sacrifice to do it?
I don't have the answer to that.
And so I was like, I had like all of these questions. The whole Revelations is another one where I was like, this seems bonker. Like God is like taking this like justified vengeance on the world through Revelations. And like, is that okay? Like this mass genocide? Because some of us happen to be gay, and some of us have sex outside of marriage. And so
I suppose the way I look at it is the Bible is a guide, but the real Jesus is the spirit that dwells within you. So that's sort of whenever people tell me, oh, well, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, I was thinking today, I don't know, I was thinking like the Bible's like the internet.
Yeah.
You can just find a verse that reinforces what you already believe.
I think that's a great example.
Oh my God.
That is the best. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that.
Well, yeah, it's like, you know, I'll read something from the Bible. Okay, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. But it says it's wrong to be gay. And it's like, oh man, you sort of have to read the whole thing, but it's not, I don't think it's meant to be taken so literally.
Yeah.
And people get into these theological debates like, man, there's so much theology out there, but I'm just like, man, it's just, I just want to know what that spirit, if it's there at all, that dwells within me is saying. And, I mean, whenever I feel convicted of sin, it's positive. There's no guilt. Like, I was thinking about it today. I was like, I suppose what I'm trying to get at is, maybe I'm thinking of really deep things, like feelings of resentment. Like, I mean, it's so...
That's bad for you. If you're sitting here, like, angry and resentful
But that's what I mean.
time.
But if resentment is a sin...
I don't think it's a sin. I don't think there's anything evil about you if you have resentment.
No. You're misinterpreting. Like, it's not evil about me. The resentment in and of itself is evil, and it deteriorates me. Therefore, it's sin. But I don't think I should feel guilty about that. Like,
no, I don't think you should either.
No, whenever I think about it, I'm like, there's actually hope that I can be redeemed in some, and not feel this resentment. And that's sort of where Jesus comes in for me. And I feel like that's where the church has gone wrong.
Yeah, I do think, going back to what you said about the Bible being like the internet, you can always find something to assist your own view.
Yeah.
The great example that comes to my mind is like the Proverbs 31 woman. And she's like this businesswoman. She's this entrepreneur. She does all of these amazing things.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you've got like the woman who's not supposed to speak in church. And you get like all of these misogynistic men that are in the church. And they just like, they'll happily ignore the woman that's the businesswoman. And they'll happily ignore the woman that's the prophet. And they'll instead focus on women as chattel, or women as slave, women as silent, women as homemaker.
I suppose you have to look at that. The fundamental message of the Bible is that we're all valuable and all equal. We're all valuable and equally loved by God. So if anyone uses the Bible to contradict that message, then it's wrong.
I mean, you can get that. And you can also you can take the Bible and you can get what you want out of it.
But yeah,
and some people do, and I think good people do. I think good people read the Bible and they go, man, the Sermon on the Mount, love and peace and acceptance. And then other people read it and they can pick out like the worst parts of their nature and use that to justify their worst instincts.
But I would say that's objectively wrong, because you're not producing anything positive. You're not producing anything good. You know, the fruits of the Spirit, love, patience, goodness, kindness, joy, like that. You should be emulating that. If you're an actual Christian, if you're not emulating that, then you don't know Jesus, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh man, that's hey man, we've been talking for a minute, eh?
You're gonna have lots to edit down.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wanted to get into your mind a little bit more about politics.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you didn't say...
Diverting.
Yeah.
No, we didn't talk about politics much.
Well, politics wasn't a no-go zone on the pre-interview.
No, not at all.
So, yeah, I suppose you used to be a political commentator, and how did you got away from your Christianity? Is that when you became interested in politics? And
I was definitely always interested in politics, but moving away from Christianity kind of allowed me to, I guess, rethink why I believed certain things. And there were definitely key issues that I started to rethink in that whole space. It's like the role of government in schools was one. Obviously, like the whole free speech debate in the United States, discrimination, anti-discrimination law. I started to rethink that.
When was that? When did that become prominent? Like, it's free speech? Because that seems like a big thing today. But when did it...
I think the Christian right has been utilizing the First Amendment as a weapon in many ways.
So they can discriminate against people.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like, that student's gay. We're going to expel them. And they've been trying to do that. I saw they were trying to do that in Northern Territory recently. And there was the bill that Scott Morrison had that had the same thing. It became all about trans kids, but it wasn't just about trans kids, I don't think, at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all amalgamated now.
Oh, yeah, and that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, the LGBT community is like a lot of different communities that don't really agree on anything. It's like, what community?
That is a pet peeve of like issues where it's like, oh, I'm a feminist, which means like I believe men and women are equal and should be treated equally under the law, and I believe that men and women are individuals and have individual desires and should be allowed to make choices for themselves based on their own individual preferences and shouldn't be restricted. And yet, that has somehow become associated with so many other things. It's like, you've got feminism and like climate change. And it's like, feminism isn't about climate change, but you've got people protesting like without their tops on in Paris or something because of climate change. they're like, and this is a feminist issue. And I was like, but no.
I mean, if I was to ask you, like, why should I be a feminist? Like, what would you say? Because in my head, there are a lot of negative connotations to it.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to redeem feminism in a way and bring it back to what feminism is actually about.
Where do you think feminism has lost its way?
I think it's just adding things on, taking things onto the feminist name that aren't actually about supporting women, aren't actually about...
It's more about attacking men now.
Yeah, attacking men. I was like, I don't think men have anything to do with feminism. It's about women. Like, let's not make this a man-hating club.
Yeah. I wonder how big that club is, though. Like, it seems pretty it's called, like, woke feminism or something, but I'm under the impression that must be such a tiny fraction of feminism, and we use that to represent the whole...
I think it is.
And that's why the right or...
And
people are like, yeah, feminism, but it's like...
No, I think it's important. We need feminism because there's still very clear and apparent sexism in our society today. And that needs to be... And it's not as extreme in, say, a place like Australia. But you've got the case right now in Iran. And Mahsa Amini and her death and the protests, that's where feminists need to be standing up and saying, hey, women should be allowed to wear whatever they want. Like there is a definite place for feminism,
but instead we're arguing about the gender pay gap, which I'm unsure exists. What are your thoughts on that?
Depends on how you define it. I think they've done a very bad job. There's been an oversimplification of what the gender pay gap is.
Okay.
So people you'd be very hard pressed to find a case where you walk into a business today and you got a male and a female employee doing the exact same job and the female employee is being paid less than the male employee. That did happen in the past because there was a whole idea that men had to provide for their families and women did not. And so then women would get paid less because they weren't the provider.
For the same job?
For the same job. It was definitely a thing like in the 70s. But we're past that now.
Yeah, that feels like a worthy cause to rattle against. But my understanding is doesn't take into consideration women who don't work.
Well, now, so that is now illegal. But now there's a case of, like, I think superannuation is a really good example where currently, until just recently, in the last budget, really, they changed the parental leave scheme, and that's going to happen in 2026, where men and women can get the same parental leave, and they can split that however they want. Before that, it was only women got the parental leave. It was only the primary carer, and men would get like 2 weeks.
But now they get the same? Or wait,
now they can get the same. And
does that cut into the woman's parental leave, or does it just add?
They can choose.
Okay.
I think it's split between the two. But what that means is the woman can take time, can go back to work if she wants or not go back to work, and they can kind of figure that out amongst themselves. Before, it was just the woman had to stay home, and that means that she's now going to be lacking on her superannuation. She misses those years of work. That then compounds. And so a little thing like that helps to reduce that gap in those lifetime earnings for the woman.
Do you think missing all those years of work is a small price to pay to be raising?
I mean, it depends on the person.
An infant, right? I mean, man, because you'll never get that back.
I mean, you'll never get both back. Like, it's
you can always work.
You can always work.
You'll never get the one-year-old child at that point in time back.
You actually have to like 1-year-olds, though.
What kind of 1-year-olds are you talking about, man?
They're little terrors.
The cute little ones.
They're cute.
Their little cheeks.
They got the cute little cheeks, but they're little devils inside.
I suppose I want to round up a little bit. I did have a question on the tip of my tongue. Why should I get involved in politics? Like, why should I care?
I think there's a difference between why should you care and why should you get involved. I don't think I'd necessarily recommend anyone get involved, particularly like in the party system and that, like,
there seems like people are fighting for all these different causes, and I'm just like,
I think it's worth thinking more deeply about issues, particularly like the issues of the day that affect our society today. I think it's almost always worth learning more, researching more, figuring out what you believe, looking a little deeper than the talking points. So I think a lot of people that aren't involved in politics, and people that are involved in politics with the air quotes, that are just like very active, it becomes just, you get the talking points, you get the superficial top level, whatever everyone is saying about some issue. It could be, say, like climate change and renewable energy. We're going to talk about how great renewable energy is. Renewable energy is the only option. We're going to hate nuclear energy because I don't know why the Greens hate nuclear energy so badly, but because they think it's going to blow up the world or whatever. And there's going to be all of this waste. So we've decided like windmills, good, solar, good, coal, bad. And it's just black and white. And then you got on the right, you got coal, good, therefore windmills and solar, bad. And it's like, think a little bit more deeply of, yes, the right has a point that we have a certain need for a certain amount of energy in our world, like in order for society to function, otherwise people will die.
But do you think like it's possible that the people that are actually in government and policy, like they're knowledgeable, they know a lot about this sort of stuff, the scientists? Because I'm seeing a lot of young people with opinions on the internet just reposting stuff they know nothing about. Like,
oh yeah, and it becomes down to
shouldn't we just let the experts deal with it? Oh, feel free to push back on that.
Did you hear much of what happened the last 2 years with the experts?
Right. Yeah.
No, I think common sense will take you a long way if you learn a little bit more about a topic.
Okay.
Not being so this team is right, that team is wrong.
I mean, I don't know. My understanding of it is a lot of policy and issues. You've got like our party systems. You've got the Green, Labour, the Liberal. Like they all have a diverse viewpoints on certain topics. Like, I mean, we vote to put those people in Parliament to make the decisions for us. Is that sort of a bad way to look at things?
I mean, I have a problem with the big parties in general.
Okay.
But no one can be an expert in everything, and you do have to put some faith in people to make good decisions. I do think we get very narrow and we end up just not looking at issues more deeply, and we don't ask questions, and we just take the team. You take whatever team you identify with, your friends identify with, you agree with them on X thing, so they must be right about Y thing. And even like views change. I think that was interesting with Trump, where Trump was like super anti-immigrant and he had all of these other ideas, but people became more populist. They became less free trade during Trump. And it was like Trump was pushing. Then I was like, I don't think conservatives or Republicans have always been free trade, but that's what the guy that was the leader of their team was saying. And so they were like, we got to get China. We got to stop the trade with China. We got to stop trade. We got to cut back. Oh, he's putting all these tariffs. That's really good for the American economy. When in reality, it wasn't. Like, if you look at the numbers, it was terrible for the American economy. And traditionally, Republicans haven't been supportive of tariffs. But because their team member was, the guy that was in charge was, they just kind of changed their minds.
Well, he thinks this, so I must think it too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think there's a lot of very shallow thinking on political issues, and a lot of yelling and shouting at each other and shouting past each other.
What is the best thing young people can do to stay informed?
Oh, that's a good question. I think having a diverse network of people in your life.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best thing. Listening to different perspectives of people that don't agree with you. Maybe
even your news. Like, just...
You do, listen, yeah, definitely read different news. Like, read The Guardian and read The Australian.
Okay.
Like, read the SMH, also read the Daily Telegraph,
to get a different sort of what kind of perspectives are out there, because you might find when you're not reading your own side, you might agree.
Because sometimes both sides have good ideas.
And we have much more in common than we sort of think, but we're inherently tribal.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, we get super tribal.
Yeah. I wonder why that is. I'll have to get a political psychologist on to talk about that one day when I'm...
super big.
Absolutely.
This is the episode that's going to do it. It'll just skyrocket us after I've rambled on for like an hour and a half.
Well, I mean, it will be edited down.
I talked a lot of shit.
No, I liked it. We got into a big discussion about religion, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, and I never fully got to like answering the actual question that you asked.
That's all right. Well, we'll come back for round 2. Emilie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.